Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery, and I'm your host. These next few episodes are going to be old Patreon episodes that patrons have heard, but everybody else has not. I've shared that the Patreon is shifting. I can't keep up with 2 episodes every single week, and so instead of doing an extra bonus episode on the Patreon every week, I'm going to do one monthly energetic prediction video or episode for that, and then we're still doing our monthly meetings. So if you're interested in hanging out with us and discussing like a workshop topic every week, or just kind of sharing about our lives and what's going on, and just sharing the everyday woo-woo things that we have going on, it's really fun, and I've just really enjoyed getting to know women over there. So that'll be linked if you're interested in checking that out. Also, of course, I am super busy with readings and mentorships. So if you're interested in a psychic read or a mentorship, I do have one more spot as far as mentorships open starting in August. So if you're interested in that, all of that will be linked in the show notes. So these next few episodes, again, are going to be old Patreon episodes, and then we will go back to our regular scheduled programming in terms of recording new episodes and interviews and guests on the podcast and all of that fun stuff. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Don't forget to leave a review. It really, really, really helps. And I'll see you in the next one. Hello, beautiful, wonderful patrons. Welcome back to another Patreon episode. We are talking about Kundalini, which I told you in the last episode where I got completely sidetracked and started talking to AI about universes instead. But Kundalini is a really interesting topic in itself, so I don't want to act like this one isn't just as cool, because it absolutely is, and probably a little bit more practical to your life also. But I just want to talk about Kundalini and a Kundalini awakening, and how do you know if you're having one or if you have had one? Because I feel like Kundalini and the idea of a Kundalini awakening is something that gets just tossed around, like the phrase gets tossed around a lot, and nobody actually talks about what it is. And so I noticed that for a long time. I was like, why does everybody keep talking about this and nobody actually says what it is? And when you get into it, it really is an interesting topic and the way everything works. So I thought it would be good to deep dive into it, because chances are you have either had a Kundalini awakening or you are having one, because sometimes it's a quick process and sometimes it's a long process. So let's break it down, because if you're on a spiritual journey, you should probably know what this is and how it works. Just as a reminder before I get started, I just want to say 2 things. 1, just a reminder that I do personal psychic readings, and the link for that, the booking link, is always in the show notes. And 2, I am launching this week a psychic mentorship for people who are really wanting to develop their psychic gifts in a very dedicated space. It's going to be 3 months long, and it's going to include weekly meetings. Weekly meetings, and there's going to be 2 different containers, so it could be every other week, it could be every week, but we're just really going to deep dive into, again, your gifts, how to strengthen them, doing practice readings, having homework, like really just, I want you to walk away after 3 months fully understanding what your strongest gifts are, confidently accessing intuitive information, confidently accessing your psychic gifts, knowing how to tune in and get answers on your own without a doubt, and also potentially pursuing it as a business if that is something you feel called to, or if that's something on your path. Although that is not required at all. You can just develop your gifts because everybody has them, and because it is a tool that I think everyone should have developed, because it will ultimately really change your life. Once you gain access to that intuitive channel in a way that lets you immediately access information beyond your ego brain, it just shifts everything in your life. It just does. So anyway, I am starting that mentorship. Email me if you're interested at daremetoprosper@gmail.com. Okay, Kundalini. So the thing about a Kundalini awakening, I didn't know this. Kundalini is actually a Sanskrit word that translates to coiled serpent, which makes sense because you may have seen symbolism for a Kundalini awakening that includes the image of a serpent. Like that's usually the way it's depicted if you were to see an image in reference to it. but it basically refers to a dormant spiritual energy that lives at the base of your spine. And it's pictured that way because it's kind of coiled and just literally sitting there waiting until it is activated at some point in your life. And this is a genuine energetic experience that you have. And everybody who awakens spiritually in their lifetime, or who raises their frequency, their vibration to a certain point, experiences a Kundalini awakening. And it's basically just the idea of your life force energy that is sitting dormant. Once your vessel gets to a certain point where it has the capacity to hold that energy because it's such a high frequency, it gets released. And that energy then like coils up through your chakras, and it basically is your life force energy going from kind of like being in an egg where it's not fully developed to breaking out of an egg and like traveling all the way up your chakras to a point where it's like an evolution of sorts, where it's part of that awakening where all of a sudden you can access different channels, you can access different energies, you can access different things that you didn't have access to before because of where you were existing vibrationally. Does that make sense? So it's essentially your life force energy in its most concentrated, most potent form. And the beginning of your awakening is when it starts moving upward. And the reason it doesn't come online sooner is because, again, your vessel isn't ready to hold it. So like if your Kundalini energy started uncoiling or started coming out of its egg, so to speak, when you were younger or when you were less developed energetically, it would be like plugging something that's too high voltage into a plug that can't hold it, and then the socket blows. You know what I mean? So the container has to be prepared before the energy can safely move through it. And it's your soul's intelligence, essentially, that is the thing that recognizes when you're ready. And so when you're ready is essentially when your awakening happens. And the awakening happens when your soul basically sees that you have done enough work through lived experience, through suffering, through seeking, through learning, through growth, where your system is ready to handle more. So your awakening happens, your Kundalini happens, basically as kind of a graduation into a new level of capacity. And so that process starts when you have built enough internal architecture, so to speak, to receive the energy without your fuse blowing, right? Without kind of being overwhelmed or in some way harmed by an energy that's too much. Okay, so what triggers a Kundalini awakening? Because you may have heard people reference a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, which is essentially just a really, really fast awakening where your spiritual awakening kind of happens really quickly and all of your gifts come online at once, and you have experiences that are just really jarring and really unfamiliar, and all of a sudden you're questioning everything, in a matter of days or weeks, versus someone who kind of has a slower awakening that happens over an arc of, weeks to months to even years. And different people have different experiences for different reasons. So again, it can be triggered in different ways. So it can be triggered intentionally, basically through years of dedicated meditation and breath work or yoga or other spiritual practices, where you are training your body and you are raising your frequency in a way that can hold that energy. I would say that's not as common. Maybe practicing those things is common in terms of intentionality, but doing it specifically to have the Kundalini awakening is not common to be done intentionally, because again, it usually comes with an awakening, and an awakening is usually spontaneous and not intentional. It doesn't have to be spontaneous in terms of like a moment, like it is for some people, very much triggered quickly. It could be, an awakening that wasn't intentional but still unfolded a little bit slower. So when someone says a spontaneous Kundalini awakening, they usually mean one that was very sudden. And that's often triggered by a major life disruption. So some sort of trauma or a sudden loss or a near-death experience or some sort of sudden spiritual encounter, like an ET encounter, something, again, just really jarring, or even just like a really intense period of your life where you feel really lost and really, something that kind of triggers this deep soul activation. The common thread being that something cracked open the container and the energy that was waiting underneath started moving. Again, it's like something cracked the egg and it started coming out. Now, if it doesn't happen that way, it can happen a little bit more gradually. So sometimes there's not an identifiable trigger. Sometimes people just reach a point in their soul's evolution where an awakening begins, but it was always coming. It was always part of their path. The timing was always meant to be this way. Like, I don't think I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I think mine was more gradual. It was more an unfolding of, I, genuinely had certain questions, and I kind of felt stirred and uncomfortable in the life that I was living. And so I started shifting my perspective and changing my mind on things. And it kind of happened slowly over time. I will say, and I've mentioned this before, that I did have one particular moment in a meditation where I felt like something got unlocked. Now, was that an entire Kundalini awakening on its own? I don't know. I guess it's possible. But I've talked about seeing those geometric shapes, and I just posted a TikTok mentioning this as well because I was talking to a client about it. But I had a deep meditation where I saw essentially sacred geometry in the meditation, and that triggered something in me where my gifts started coming online suddenly after that. Now, I don't know if that would be necessarily deemed a Kundalini awakening because I had already began my awakening process before that, but I did have sort of a trigger at that point. However, there's nothing that's more special about a spontaneous Kundalini awakening versus one that's more gradual. It's just different experiences. But generally, you would recognize which one you have experienced based on how sudden and jarring your awakening journey has been. Like, I have a psychic friend who had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening where it was kind of like all of a sudden she started having these experiences and different gifts coming online in a way that was just very fast and very abrupt. Versus, again, my experience, there's not like a single moment I would point to other than a deep meditation where I do believe something got triggered, but there wasn't like a spontaneous moment where I felt like everything was just happening at once. So in a sense, you could equate a Kundalini awakening to a general spiritual awakening. It's just a Kundalini awakening, a Kundalini activation is specifically talking about that life force energy that sits coiled, and there's more of a moment or a season where that climbs through your chakras and kind of opens as a vessel. Versus, I would define a spiritual awakening as more than just that energy itself. It's all, everything is that energy itself, but you know what I mean? Like, it would also be kind of the perspectives and the overall beliefs and your way of seeing yourself within the world, within the universe, what it's kind of like your conscious and unconscious energy, where I would say your Kundalini energy is more like that subconscious but specific, the internal life force energy. Does this make sense? So how do you know if you are having or have had a Kundalini awakening? The clearest sign would be feeling that you are fundamentally changing. And, if you consider yourself to have had or are having a spiritual awakening, again, these things would be overlapping. So you're fundamentally changing in a way that you can't really control and you can't really explain. It's just something that you are moving through. It's something that you're going through. And not at the level of just learning new things or making different choices, not just at the conscious level, but genuinely becoming, like, feeling yourself becoming a different person at your level of like your beliefs and your values and your sense of self. Like, you just feel completely different from the inside out, not just the things that you are choosing to do differently. So again, you might also find that you have changed your preferences in terms of food or in terms of relationships. Like, maybe you all of a sudden feel that you cannot operate within certain relationships that you used to be able to operate in, or different preferences just with entertainment or music or habits or even spiritual practices that you've moved on from and towards other things. Basically, all of these different ways where your system is outgrowing its old container and you're kind of expanding into a new container. And this is also where a lot of that shadow work happens, like the idea of dark night of the soul. All of that is part of this process of growth, part of that evolution process. So it's not just like one day you're in the old container and the next day you wake up in a new container. It's a process. And that whole process is part of this growing and expanding and learning lessons, and all of the really hard, uncomfortable stuff that we do here on Earth is part of this awakening process. So if if you feel like you're still smack in the middle of that, you are probably still in the middle of that Kundalini awakening. And again, we're all still learning lessons, so it's not just that, oh, something hard is going on in your life, so you're still in a Kundalini awakening. It's more like that initial transformative process of, I'm really shifting as a person. I don't even recognize myself anymore. I'm completely different than I used to be a few years ago. It's kind of like where you are in that process. And honestly, you don't have to recognize a beginning and an end to this process. It doesn't matter. Once it's released, it will kind of find its way up. That life force energy will fully expand in your vessel. You don't need to have an ending point. It's just a way of recognizing. And quite honestly, if you're sitting here listening to this podcast episode, I'm sure you have already kind of cracked that egg open. It's just a matter of kind of where you are in that process. And again, it's not like a simple, just like, oh, it's released and then it just climbs up your chakras and it's no big deal. It's a process where everything that gets activated along the way has to be integrated. So again, think of it this way. Okay, before a Kundalini awakening, before that life force energy is released to move upwards through your chakras, it's sitting there, right? And your body hasn't reached a level that it could hold it yet, okay? Then when it cracks open, it begins making its way, again, starting in your root chakra, right? That's like your chakra of stability and home and foundations and sexual energy, right? And we've done episodes on sexual energy and why that is like so tied to your life force energy, okay? This is all connected. So it starts there and it makes its way up, right? Through your sacral chakra, through your solar plexus, through your heart chakra, through your throat chakra. Words are hard. Okay, but it's not like that happens in seconds. That is a process. And during that process, as that energy is moving up, your body is integrating. Your body is adjusting to new frequencies. You have different things coming online. That's why you have all the physical symptoms and the emotional symptoms and all of these things. You've heard ascension symptoms. Kind of the same thing. Like ascension symptoms usually refer to outer energies that are hitting our bodies and kind of helping raise our frequency. Kundalini is the same thing, but it's happening from the inside. So as your life force energy is kind of climbing up, you are also having symptoms as you are ascending from the inside out. Does that make sense? So this episode doesn't actually really need to be really long and complicated. It's more just kind of explaining to you what Kundalini energy is and how it works. Because I really feel like, and this, I think about this in terms of all of my podcast episodes as a whole, some episodes are helping you work through emotional wounds. Some episodes are how to do this, how to do that. And a lot of episodes are, this is how this works. Because when I think of a spiritual journey as a full picture, it's not just how it works or how to do the work. It's both, right? It's always both. It's I'm over here doing the work, but also you need an understanding of how all of these things work. That's why we talk about, the last episode with the universe and how all that works. And that's why we talk about Kundalini energy and why this works, and we talk about both sides of it because both of those sides are things that you need to put together in order to have a full understanding of what's happening and what you need to do while those things are happening. Does that make sense? It's just part of the full picture. So I'm not even really going to go into kind of how to support yourself because honestly, it's all the things that we always talk about in terms of supporting yourself. It's grounding, it's, meditating and journaling, it's sleep, it's eating well, it's, building community around you, all of the same ways that you would support yourself when you're going through anything emotionally hard or physically hard, sitting with difficult emotions and all of these things that we talk about. It's no different for this, right? It's just one of those parts of being human where our body is constantly having to adjust as we ascend, as we raise our frequency, as we evolve, especially now on Earth in 2026, this lifetime that we have chosen because this is such a incredibly fast developmental time. I don't know how to say this. Like Earth is ascending much, much faster right now than it has in ever. Certainly not in the history that we have clearly can we look back and say that there's been a period where Earth has evolved this quickly. Maybe it did like in ancient times, but just go with me here. it's evolving very, very quickly. And so it's very intense for us physically and emotionally as we ascend during this time. Okay. I'm going to wrap it up here. This is a shorter episode, but I just kind of wanted to take a topic like this one and kind of fill you in on like, what is that? What does it mean? Because guess what? You either have had one or you are having one. And since it's happening to you, you should probably know what it is, because it's just another puzzle piece that will help you fit everything together. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget, there's always links if you want to book a psychic reading or if you want to look into any of the other programs or groups or ways to work with me. That is all there. But thank you for being a patron, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.